Continuing overseas, tension is rising again between pro-Russian rebels in eastern Ukraine and the government in Kiev. The rebels held a controversial vote on Sunday, which drew praise from Moscow and condemnation from Ukraine and the West. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko signed into law a law granting special status to the separatist region and providing for local elections there in December, but the rebels ignored it and went ahead with their own vote. With me now is Walter Zaryckyj. Walter is the executive director for the Center for U.S. Ukrainian Relations and has great insight on this area. Walter, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you again.
Okay, so of course, Kiev doesn't recognize this vote, has asked Moscow, Putin, to not recognize this vote. They haven't really said much one way or the other. The pro-Russian separatists held this vote, elected leaders of Donetsk and Luhansk. So what?
Well, actually, to correct it very quickly, Donetsk and Luhansk, it's not the entire province of either Donetsk or Luhansk. It's the 1/3 of each province that they hold militarily. And so, in some ways, they don't even represent what they say they represent. They don't represent either the Donetsk, sort of republic, or Luhansk republic. It's like the Republic of Texas or Republic of California. The fact is, one, and two, what they've done is essentially breaks the Minsk agreement, because they were supposed to put down their arms and run in the elections that are supervised by the Ukrainian government in conjunction with all the other governments, and that would have included Russian oversight. And they've also broken the Ukrainian constitution, but essentially they're involved in its criminal activity.
So what happens? Moscow has been essentially silent. They said they respected the vote. The pro-Russian separatists want a validation of this vote. If Putin does speak out in support of this vote and maybe perhaps demand that these leaders be recognized, how does that change the sea?
Well, I think that a lot of the folksmen are sitting quiet in the West, but they're very nervous because in the last 2 days, I can bring to the table right now, the last 2 or 3 days, we've seen a lot of military activity by both the separatists and now those little green men that are showing up openly now, with tanks and artillery, essentially Russian military presence inside both Luhansk and Donetsk. And that's very troubling because that means that tomorrow, Putin may turn around and say something that may not be very appetizing, and he's got the military might to try to impose it.
Well, history would indicate that he's liable to do something like that. What's your assessment?
Well, the sad part is that that's exactly right. In the terrible two that we had, Stalin and Hitler last century, a lot of people have said, well, it's tough to compare with either. Actually, they're right. Stalin actually would have been more careful. Hitler is this kind of sort of daring-do type who takes it and then dares the rest of the world to do something about it. And Putin's following that pattern. It's not a very good pattern for the rest of us because he's got nuclear weapons, which Hitler did not.
On the other hand, Kiev is threatening to take these election organizers to criminal court. If they do this and convict these election organizers, what happens there?
Well, essentially, they don't just want to convict them for that, but given the fact that they've engaged in rebellion and used terror in that rebellion, it's the equivalent to what the United States faced during the Civil War. Just imagine if the United States, not only did the rebels declare it, but they would say they wanted to go back to London. Think of what Abe Lincoln would have done. I mean, the U.S. has got to really look at it that way. The U.S. population and stuff like that. The folksmen have got to see it in terms of what we would have done in history.
And oh, by the way, is there anyone from the West that monitored either of these elections that you know of?
No, actually, that's the sad part. What we've seen is, and we've had reports, I'm glad that you asked that, Debbie, we've had reports that the only folksmen that showed up are either folks from the hard left or the hard right in Europe. The hard right and the hard left both like Putin because apparently, he's their cup of tea. He wants to renew the Soviet Union. At the same time, he's a homophobe, racist, and anti-Semite. So it's their cup of tea.
Yeah, indeed. Unfortunately, we're going to stop the conversation there, but man, it sure is an interesting thing.
It sure is.
Walter Zaryckyj, thank you so much.
A pleasure,
Good to see you.
Debbie. Always. Always. Thank you.